We are about to embark on an immersive journey through the corridors of our minds. Stand by as we prepare for departure.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Productivity with Peace of Mind podcast adventure. Our journey will begin in just a moment. Inhale deeply and exhale. Our voyage takes us on a captivating tour, diving deep into the intricate layers of our thoughts and imagination. Brace yourselves for the complexities of our evolution. For a safe and enjoyable journey, stay seated, secure your helmet and protective goggles, and keep hands, feet, and legs inside while the ride is moving. Now relax and enjoy.
Have you ever had one of those seasons in life where it just feels like things don't stop changing? Like you cannot get a break, or maybe it feels like that right now. Maybe it's just thing after thing after thing, and you're wondering, when is it going to stop? And before you even have time to process the last thing that happened, something else comes wham, pulls the rug out, and you just feel like you can't keep up. And maybe some of the changes are exciting, but maybe some are heartbreaking. And oftentimes, a lot of them are completely out of our control. Some of them might be changes that you've actually been hoping and working toward and hoping for. Some happen quickly, like seemingly overnight or in an instant, and others happen so slowly that you might not even realize change is happening until you look back and realize, oh, yeah, I'm becoming that person I've been working toward, leaning into. It has been a few weeks since I've released an episode on this podcast, and I want to share a little bit about why. My life specifically hasn't just been changing around me and the environment changing, right? Because a lot of times change happens around us, but it's also been changing me. There's been so much up in the air and so much to process, and just the pieces have been everywhere. And sometimes we just need a little bit of time to live through something before we can really put the words to it. And the topic that I want to talk to you about today is something I've actually been thinking about for the past few weeks that I wanted to talk to you about, but it's just been kind of marinating and, working itself out in my brain and in my mind and in my thoughts as I process it so that I could share it with you in the most meaningful way. So that's the season I've been in. And my first thought for how this episode was going to go, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to talk about change and like how change happens in life and the different types of change and how we process it. But as I started taking notes on it and journaling out everything I wanted to talk about, I started to realize it's not just about change because life is always changing, but it's also about who we become while life keeps changing around us. And particularly when it happens, like I was saying, like one thing after another, like really fast and constant, where it feels like we can't catch a break, there's a different type of processing and evolution that happens within us when that's happening. So let's start with the different types of change. I mentioned where it happens overnight, right? You go to bed one night with one thought process or one piece of information, you wake up in the morning and something's different. Maybe it's one phone call, right? You get that call, everything changes. One accident, one diagnosis, one decision that you make or that someone else makes, one conversation that you have with somebody, everything changes. and your nervous system doesn't get this heads up or this time to process it. You just are suddenly living a completely different life. So if you think about that type of change, what type of really fast or seemingly overnight changes, or in the moment, instant, right? Instantaneously in the moment, types of changes have completely rewritten your life? Then we also have slow change, right? That looks like healing, growing, building a career, learning something new, changing our habits in new ways, becoming healthier mentally, physically, however, growing a new skill or the ability to be confident in ourselves or the ability to love ourselves. And slow change can be frustrating because it feels like it's not happening when you're in the moment, but it's always really rewarding when you get to look back and see it. And a lot of times when you don't feel it in the moment, that's where people quit because they mistake that slow progress for no progress, which isn't true. They're just not zooming out enough, or they just haven't gotten far enough in the process to see how much they're actually growing and changing. Then there's the type of change that we get to choose, right? It's starting over, right? A new chapter in life, changing a career, taking risks, leaving something secure or steady or stable when it's not quite right, even though it feels safe. We know deep down it's not right for us, and deciding to walk away from something, following our purpose, following some kind of calling. And these oftentimes are slower, right? We make a decision and we have to wait and we work through the process of that happening. Transitions professionally, transitions in our homes, transitions where we live. Choosing on purpose to take a longer runway to reach something that we're working toward. A lot of times these are more work up front, more risk, but hopefully have a greater reward, even if it's not exactly how we think or hope or want. Ideally, we've learned something amazing and leaned into someone new that is more aligned with who we want to be in that process. And we're also giving up this false sense of safety through certainty voluntarily, right? I talk a lot about how uncomfortable uncertainty can feel and how hard we work to feel certain. So in these changes that we get to choose, we're also choosing to let go of that certainty on purpose. We're choosing to feel more uncomfortable in the moment, in the process, for that greater reward in the longer term. And those types of choices can feel really exciting. Sometimes they're super scary. And sometimes you might feel both, or just a mix or array or some big soup and stew of emotions, all at the same time going through those that we get to choose. And there are also types of change that we never choose. Setbacks we didn't plan for, obstacles, challenges, accidents, loss, things not going according to our plan, other people making decisions that affect us, timing not being what we wanted or hoped, something falling apart. And with those, we have to be careful because we can end up losing so much more time wishing reality were different. So those ones can be kind of a quicksand effect because we lose ourselves ruminating and stewing in regret and worry. And in all these types of change, the main event is the change, and this transition in our life and in ourselves is everything that happens afterward and through that process. It's like this tunnel or this road that we get to pass through, this journey that we get to take between where we came from, who we were before the change, and who we're becoming on that road, on that journey, in that tunnel along the way, and who we ultimately get to become and what we get to create, what will be in our life on the other side of that change. And it can expand us. It can be exciting, like I said, or scary. But we tend to focus mostly on the arrival at the end. We rarely actually take the time to sit in that tunnel, sit on that road, and live in that space of the transition. And I've personally been in this tunnel or on this road of transition and change a lot all at once recently. No normal routine, no one place feeling like mine. My entire professional identity changing and shifting and turning into something new that I'm working on the plan for, but don't entirely have all the details and certainties on how it'll all play out, right? As is with any goal. We set the plan and make the plan and then kind of surrender to what unfolds for us. And I'm exploring me again. It's another chapter for me of exploring myself, exploring my options, building this new chapter. There's times of waiting, and I've built this runway for myself, and I'm taking risk. I'm stepping into this unknown space, this dark room, this unfamiliar field, if you will, with no guarantee. I have a direction, but I don't have certainty. So where are you right now? What tunnel, what road, what transition are you on that you could be more present with instead of rushing to the end or only thinking that what's on the other side or what's at the end of that is what matters? Because one of the biggest things that this season, this chapter I'm going through has exposed to me more than anything else is my relationship with my own sense of control over my life and what's happening with me and around me. We have so many jokes out there about adulting and not wanting to adult. And a lot of times, being an adult feels like we have to, put all this effort and grip to control everything, plan, prepare, prevent anything from going wrong, predict every little thing that could possibly happen. And then always life happens. So recently, on a day where a lot was happening and I had a very tight schedule, like very real deadlines, I was rear-ended by a gentleman having a seizure. We were stopped in traffic. There was actually an accident up ahead, and so all traffic was stopped, and the road was empty behind us, but the other lanes were full and stopped, and everything ahead of us. And then all of a sudden, this car behind us just like flies up full speed, slams into us. And when we walked back to look into the car, the driver was having a seizure. His doors were locked. We had a hard time getting to him. And, I have dreams about this stuff. And usually in the dream, it's really hard to call for help or dial 911. And something that was really cool that actually happened was well, I felt a lot of sensations of panic and worry and, just like ultimately like freaking out for this man and for him like driving into our car and then being unable to control himself and not being safe himself and then his door being locked. But somebody was going in the passenger door, putting the car in park, turning the vehicle off and holding him while he was having his seizure. I was able to go back to my vehicle, pick up my phone, and dial 911 and call for help. And help came. And that was really cool to feel that I could call for help when I needed it for somebody. I actually got him the help that he needed, and then ultimately the help that we needed for our car. But that was like afterthought to this gentleman getting medical attention. Fast forward to another scenario that happened. We were towing a trailer, and this trailer almost broke off right in front of me. And again, panic, adrenaline, worst case thinking, just freaking out. But I handled it, and we found a solution And even though in my mind, I very quickly went to everything's ruined, everything's bad, this isn't going to work out, we won't find a solution, we found the solution. Fast forward like another week, I'm getting rear-ended again. I cannot make this up. There's so many other things that happen, but I'm just kind of giving you some examples of how these things process and how I processed through some of these things. But I had been rear-ended just days prior. But I'm calm. I'm assessing the situation, I'm handling it, I'm engaged, I'm speaking with the police officers. This time, there was no medical emergency. The I think it was a brother and sister in the car behind me. Their brakes went out. So they're hitting the brakes at a red light, but the brakes go out. So they end up hitting our trailer. We were fine, but their car was not. But it was interesting how I was suddenly so calm that time. Obviously, no one's in like medical help, right? But like when you have all of these big things happening like really quickly that you can't turn back from, you can't avoid, you can't pretend it didn't just happen, right? You have to call the police. You have to face and deal with what just happened. And again, I was on a timeline. Somebody was waiting for me. I was going to pick up something to put on that trailer, but I had to stop and deal with it. And I don't know exactly what did change other than just realizing through thing after thing after thing that it was going to be okay, that I was going to figure it out, that things would just line up. There was another incident where somebody cut their thumb open pretty badly with a really sharp knife. And we ended up in the emergency room. And in that type of situation, there's just not time to panic. There's only logistics. There's only this timeline and taking action and getting to where you need to be because we're both handling a very real timeline and logistics that have to happen and getting them the care they need in the midst of it so that we can continue on. And that was one of the ones where there's just not even time to sit and catastrophize and worry about like what does this mean? What, what else is going to go wrong? You just have to say like what's next? What's the next thing I have to do to handle this? And on another day, I found myself driving up this mountain road. It went from like a 4-lane road and got narrower and narrower and narrower. And I'm following ways and it gets steeper and steeper and steeper. And suddenly there's like complete cliff drop-offs. And suddenly I have no service. My cruise control shuts off and I'm driving manually at 5 miles per hour. But I'm calm. I'm weirdly calm. And it's like dark out. Like, and it's scary. It's not that it wasn't scary, but I just knew that panicking wasn't going to help me. It's almost like the voice of that 911 person I was speaking to telling me panic isn't going to help from that first accident. And I knew now that it wouldn't. So I didn't panic. I just kept driving and I just kept going and I just kept breathing and I kept talking to myself. And eventually I got all the way up the mountain and all the way down the mountain and I made it out and I eventually got service again. And eventually everything was fine. Another thing that happened recently is we had a family pet, one of my parents' dogs, reaching the end of her life, not doing well, and they had to make a really difficult decision to end her suffering and let her go. And that's the type of change that we knew was coming. It was out of our control. And I was very lucky that I got to see my sister shortly after. And instantly, just seeing her at the airport, we just held each other and cried and just felt all of those emotions that were coming up. And all of these different moments, all of these different changes and transitions and challenges and things that come up for us and obstacles ask different things of us. They teach us different lessons. And it's not like I've never been through anything hard. I've been through a lot of actually really hard things in my life. But something happens when just big challenge after big challenge after big challenge hits back to back to back over the span of just a couple of weeks. And how I handle it, how I progressed, how I changed over those couple of weeks and handling things more calmly and just being able to move forward regardless of how I was feeling wasn't because anything was getting easier, but because I am changing. Because control used to mean like knowing as much as I could, planning as much as possible, feeling secure within myself, having a routine, being able to predict what's coming. Not nothing going wrong, but being super prepared when things went wrong. But now, control is so much more about controlling myself, regulating myself, being able to discern what each new challenge and obstacle and change needs in each moment, and not jumping to catastrophic conclusions. I'm still working on this. I'm actively working on this, but I'm sharing it with you as I do. I'm working on waiting, gathering information, breathing, because not every unknown deserves panic. Not everything that goes wrong is a like huge life-altering catastrophe. It might work out. It might be okay. And knowing that could have changed my life years ago. Knowing that uncertainty is not always dangerous. Because control is not about controlling our whole life or everyone around us. And we know this logically, like we know this. And living it and reminding ourselves and living through this helps us embody it as we move forward. It helps us actually show up different. It helps us actually change our behavior so we can regulate ourselves enough to respond wisely, even with a lot of emotion. Because sometimes we need action, sometimes we need patience, sometimes it's grief, sometimes we just have to wait and see and find out. Sometimes we need a little bit of hope. Sometimes we got to call 911. Sometimes we got to drive a little slow. Sometimes we just need to hold somebody. Sometimes we need rest, reflection. So each time you find yourself up against anything, you can ask yourself, what does this moment actually need from me right now? And I've talked about this in some of my episodes about how I have spent a lot of my life always feeling like something's going wrong or will go wrong, always looking around the corner, that hypervigilance. I've come a long way in that journey, but it's still part of me. It still comes up for me, especially under high, high stress times and high, high changing and transitioning times that really, really lack certainty. I fall back into that habit. I fall back into catastrophic thinking, certain death, worst case scenarios, just waiting for the worst possible thing to happen, and my nervous system just on high, high, high alert. And then the goal becomes preventing bad things from happening. But then when life keeps happening, one thing after another, after another, after another, I started to realize that I was being taught an important lesson. I wasn't being taught that bad things won't happen because they do. They always do. Good and bad things, duality, light and dark will always be there. And all of that can happen, and I can still be okay. And all of what's happening to you can happen, and you can still be okay. All of it's evidence. All of it is proof for your nervous system to collect, to add up, to tally up that you survive again and again until one day you get to trust yourself more. Not because life is suddenly just perfect and safe and great and nothing's going wrong, but because you're steadier, because you're there for you, because you're regulating even when it's hard, because you come back to regulating even when you forgot, even when you got too dysregulated to remember what to do. And you find this deep intimacy with discomfort. We spend our whole lives trying to avoid feeling uncomfortable or anything going wrong or any negative emotions happening. We feel like, oh, if we just hold it all in and don't feel any of it, I can avoid it. But it just gets swept under a rug that grows a bigger and hairier monster. The waiting, the uncertainty, the grief, the silence, the boredom, the fear, the change. Life continues to introduce us to discomfort again and again until discomfort stops feeling unfamiliar. And don't get me wrong, I don't enjoy discomfort. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about like feeling comfort in the discomfort, and it doesn't mean you have to love it. It doesn't mean it has to feel good, but maybe we don't have to fear it the way we once did. Maybe being resilient isn't about having no fear, but being familiar with how it feels. And like I said before, I originally planned for this episode to be about how much change has happened in my life and the types of change and how we process. But what I realize is the biggest change isn't just what happens around us, but our response to change. We don't have to be less emotional, but we can be more discerning. We can become more emotionally mature and intelligent. And that's not about suppressing any kind of emotion. We can still feel every emotion that comes up for us. And that discernment comes with knowing what each moment is asking from you. Do I need to take action? Do I need to wait for something? Is it time for tears? Is it time to remember there's hope? Are there logistics I need to make happen? Do I need stillness? Do I need love? Do I need to cultivate courage? And I'm just curious, as you listen to this, how your response has changed over the years in your life. So, right now, if your life feels upside down, if you're in transition, if you're grieving, if you're waiting, if everything in your life feels completely uncertain and there's just so much change happening, you can barely keep up, I can't promise that everything will work out exactly how you hope that it will. Nobody can promise that. But I can tell you what I've learned. Time stops for no one. Tomorrow always arrives. The sun always comes. And life keeps moving. And somehow, so will you. And so will I. That doesn't mean we don't grieve. We feel it. We feel every ounce. Feel the sadness, feel the anger, the fear, the grief, the hope, the excitement, anxiety, envy, uncertainty. Feel all of it. All of the delicious emotions that come with being human and being alive. These emotions are not proof of anything falling apart or going wrong. They're proof that you're alive and breathing. And then keep going. Never abandon yourself. Hold on to yourself, your values, your people, your community, curiosity, hope. Hold on to what matters to you. Because there will be moments when you don't feel strong enough to hold on to life. But if you keep holding on to those things, all those things that matter to you most, they will hold on to you. And I know life will keep changing. Difficult things will always happen and be there. And there will be seasons where everything feels upside down. But I also believe something I didn't know before, that I can meet life even when it won't stop changing. And maybe that's really what resilience is, not controlling anything, but meeting it where it's at. Not even always just pummeling through, plowing through to the end, to the other side, but meeting it gently and softly in the mess, where it's at right now, one moment, one breath, one next step at a time.
Thank you for braving the inside of your mind with me. The better we understand ourselves, the more deeply we understand the world, and as our awareness grows, life just gets better and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and share this with anyone else you think could benefit from listening. A quick reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. I am not a licensed therapist, and the discussions here are not a substitute for professional advice. If you're dealing with a specific issue or need personalized guidance, please consult with a qualified professional. Your well-being is important, and this podcast is simply a platform for sharing insights and experiences. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Until next time.